Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Kristen of Abbey Research, and welcome to this edition of Welcome to My World. As we have teased a few times in other coverage of Colonizer's World Tour this week, that we were going to be talking to a real live Army member, and not Army as in armed forces, but Army as in BTS's fan. Fans just feels cheap for what you guys are, but I'll get to that in a minute. So Ashley is joining us. She is actually the reason I got into K-pop. And so I'm really excited for her to kind of gather us, kind of guide us through a couple basics, and then also why Army is so important and such a big part of her life. So Ashley, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
All right.
Thanks for having interest.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I know. Like, you usually flood our chat with stuff and you're like, I'm sorry. I'm like, no, I love knowing this stuff.
Once you get into it, it's hard to think of anything else.
It does seem very all-encompassing if you want it to be.
Yes.
Got it. So how did you get into this?
Well, I'm actually what they affectionately refer to as a baby Army. I would say I definitely still classify that. I'm coming up to my year of being into BTS within the next month or so.
Okay.
And this is being recorded in 2021. So the last year, most people will know, sort of have a reference point of where I might have been mentally. And I just found this group, and I started kind of first going in to, I have to say, first I met Army because I'm online and I know people exist online, and Stan Twitter is a huge deal. And I have been in fandoms before, I was in Marvel fandom, and at the time I was really into Shadowhunters, like the CW show. And I met people who were also into BTS, and I just kind of was like, wow, there's a lot of enthusiasm here. And I was looking for something that would just really occupy my mind in a very positive way. And then I started being like, well, what's up with the music? They had just come out with a Map of the Soul album. And I really got, the first time they were on my radar was during this American press tour that they did at the beginning of 2020. They did Jimmy Fallon, they did Ellen, they did all of the American shows. I Am American. So they kind of got on my radar as oh, other than just this band that exists, I was like, oh, I like this song Black Swan. What is this? I really like this song On. What is this? And I just started kind of falling down the rabbit hole. Once you ask one question, it kind of just snowballs into oh, well, I really like that person's voice during the bridge. Who is that? And there's kind of this joke within Army that the first question is well, what's their names? Who's who? And then you just kind of, that's the first question. And then there's an infinity of follow-up questions that just kind of can, if you want, just take a lot of your time, especially coming in 2020 when, they debuted in 2013. So you have a whole backlog that you can really dive into. And just between all of the online translations of their videos. A lot of their videos have captions. Some of their solo stuff don't have captions. So you find yourself looking at lyrics translations and then being like, wow, that sentiment really stuck with me. And then you go to listen to the music and you might not remember line by line what they're saying, but the concept and the feelings that they evoke really sort of resonate. And then as you listen to them more, you're like, oh, right, that's Jimin singing that part, and that's what he's saying verbatim, because I've listened to this 100 times and read, the translation so many times. And so, yeah, I really think that for me, at least coming in at 2020, it was really a comfort thing. It was something where here's these people who really are all about positivity and all about loving yourself and loving each other. And there was no space for negativity in my head, at least in the beginning of 2020. So to have just this very positive group really kind of set my tone for the year, and just how I was entertaining myself when everything was kind of going amok.
Yes, I'm not too generous.
Yeah.
So as you've kind of gotten, because now you run a Twitter account as well, you're quite active, even though you're baby, I know.
Yes.
So as you've gotten more into things, is it still an entirely positive space, or has it gotten more nuanced than that?
I would say that BTS is always positive. Like
Okay.
the band itself is positive. The lyrics that they give out, the message that they give, their interviews. People who love BTS,
You know.
I think that there's always this sort of guidepost to be positive,
Okay.
but there will definitely be arguments about nuances. So I've seen like mistranslation arguments. So they do all these interviews and then they'll be like, oh no, he didn't really say that. Like, this is what the translation is, or this is what the, like, I've just seen the nuances of like, you're right, I'm wrong kind of pop up, but it's always within ARMY. It's never within BTS. And then usually they advocate love all 7 members. They're very big on their own bonds and their bond with ARMY. So there's always this like, if you're being negative, you're wrong. Like, it's not like, yay, let's be negative. But it is like, no, like, look to the boys and what do they want to say? And like, I'm older than them. Like, I'm not looking at them as like role models. I kind of look at them as like peers. And I'm like, yeah, like, we dictate how we want to see the world and what we want to put out into the world. And that's their message. And I feel like it's like a really great message for any age. And like, I don't necessarily think that like I've only learned this from BTS, but I like that there's like, I've learned this from many things in my life, but to have such a big group reinforcing that being the norm, and then other people either subvert that norm or like go against it, and then it's like, well, check yourself. Who you're here for doesn't believe in what you're putting out into the world.
It's fascinating. And I think like that kind of level of understanding of the emotional, I guess, priorities of the artist is a huge part of a lot of the really big fan cultures now. Like, I would think the Little Monsters are like that, and like the Swifties are like that. Like, there's a lot of the like, how would this person want us to act?
I've seen that, and I think that it's interesting because like you said, I am on Twitter a lot now, but prior to BTS, I was never really on Twitter. I was on Twitter for like original writing I had a Twitter, and then like I was vaguely on Twitter for other fandoms, but never ever as much as I currently am. So I see a lot of like Swifties, and there'll be like a lot of like fandoms interacting with each other. And sometimes that goes well and sometimes it doesn't. It depends what they're like talking about. But yeah, I have seen a lot of like, Taylor wouldn't like us to act like this, or like, what would Namjoon think? And like, it's all very funny because like, that person's never going to actually see what that person's tweeted, but it is kind of like a ethos that I think is really nice, and also very different from like other types of fandoms that I've been in, where there's not like a real person, and that real person doesn't have like, hey guys, I want you to do this. Like, yeah, I guess you can say that there's like totems that characters strive for. Like Captain America has like his morals, and like Hermione Granger had like what she thought about things. But like, I think that there is like a different kind of like I feel like some people feel like there's a little more pressure when the person that you're idolizing is like a real person, and it's like, no, like, they said to do this, so let's do this, like, let's act this way, they said this. So
yeah, it's fascinating to me because I've never been active in a fandom that was based on a real person in the same way that you've been, and so that element, like, I'm tangential to all, like, so it's a fascinating element of like parasocial relationships in that way.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but because I used to be super into like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys. They were one of my first fandoms, but I don't remember anything like this. And I don't know if it's just because there was no social media, or I never really felt like Justin Timberlake was having an interview and he was talking to me in the way that I feel like BTS talks to ARMY when they have interviews. So it could just be a different dynamic. But I would say that it's different. Like, I I never thought, oh my God, what does like Joey Fatone think about like that like really mean thing I just said to this person. And I'm not saying I think about that now, but I do think that there are people who do like look to these people as like moral guideposts.
Yes. Okay, I want to put a pin in that because I think we could talk about it forever, but I want to make sure that we cover some more K-pop kind of basics. So
sure.
One of the, I think, the fear of getting into this is that not only is it a different language, literally, but there's some different like lexiconical things as well. So like one of the first questions that you asked me about a friend was, what is their bias? And I don't know what that, like, I know what that means, but if I had said that to that person, they would have had no idea what they mean.
No, for sure. So
especially what is that?
Yeah, well, bias I think is actually super interesting because it means your favorite, like who is your favorite member. But I think that as opposed to like back in the 90s when I would say, oh, my favorite member is JC Chasez, and it was something that I was like really proud of, I feel like bias almost implies like all 7 of the members are great. I have a bias towards this one, so I'm going to like this one's like pictures a little more, and that's on me. Like it's almost like a check yourself sort of thing. And this is my own interpretation of the difference.
No, but that's fascinating.
But it is fascinating to me, just in the word bias versus word favorite, like what it implies differently. Because you used to be like, oh yeah, my favorite's JC Chasez. He should get all the words. He should get all the good dance moves. He should get everything. And like you said that like unabashedly, but like now it's like, no, everybody should get like an equal share. I really like how Jungkook looked in this thing because he's my bias. And you like explain yourself that way. And it's just a different, it's a different word, and it shouldn't mean so much difference, but I see it as so much difference, and I see it implemented differently, and I think that that's very fascinating.
No, but if it is implemented differently, then that's the fascinating thing. Like the default is that there should be equity.
Yeah.
Versus the default of when we were into boy bands as teenagers, the default was hierarchy.
Yeah, and I definitely see like everyone has a bias, and you're very happy about your bias. Like your bias is like who your profile picture usually is. And like there's not like a shame about it, but like it's just used to explain you a little more. Like,
the context of how you're interacting with this fandom in a way. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's cool though.
So then the other one that I hear thrown around a lot that I don't know, and I might be butchering this, but maknae?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's pronounced maknae, but I don't. The other thing about being in fandoms is that you read everything.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I'm so used to reading these words, and even on the Blackpink documentary, when they said the words, it was fast enough that I couldn't double check my Korean pronunciation.
Right, I pronounced it in my head as maknae. And then the concept of it is the youngest one, and that word actually introduced a whole door opening of understanding of Korean culture for me, because I didn't realize how important age was in Korean culture. So based off of what I've learned from watching some 100,000 hours of BTS videos, one of the first questions that they ask each other when you meet is, what's your name and how old you are? And then how old you are is, and also Koreans at the January 1st all age up. So you age up at the same time, and so all like 95s or people born in 1995 are kind of considered the same age. And yeah,
that's the first time I'm hearing this. Okay.
Yeah, and it's I would say you might want to fact check me on if it's January 1st, but I'm almost positive it's January 1st because I've seen so many end of the year BTS videos where they're like, oh my God, I'm so excited to turn 22. Oh my God, I'm so excited to turn 23. And it's like, I know your birthday's in September, but you're saying you're turning this age because the year is turning over. So that was something that I was like, wow. And they all have their international age and their Korean age, because internationally they might be, well, they all are a year, I believe it's a year older in Korea, because you're born with 1 year or something like that. There's like some difference that there's an international age and a Korean age.
Okay.
Mind you, learning all of this with the backdrop of BTS.
No, but that's amazing. Like that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is that one of the ways that we encounter different cultures is culture, like is their cultural output. And because of South Korea's intentionality behind the exportation of their music and their movies,
the Korean wave,
and all of that, we've been able to encounter South Korean culture in a different way than we have, like, say, in a couple of weeks we're going to talk about Iranian culture. Like, that's been a different ball game. And so kind of how that works. So that's utterly fascinating. We're running a little short on time, unfortunately, because there's some time constraints for Ashley and I today. So I have one final question, and then I'm sure if I have more, you are willing to come back and chat.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I can do like a part 2 or even like an elongated part 1 if we need over the next couple of days.
I think you should come back, and we should, and maybe even get a couple other folks into a call about parasocial relationships. I think that could be really fascinating.
Yeah, that would be really interesting.
And how we kind of navigate that, and maybe even tempt Eleanor, on our editor, onto Canada, because I know she has thoughts on parasocial relationships. So anyway, finally though, my understanding is that BTS is a little bit different because it wasn't part of they weren't formed through training the way that like Blackpink was. Is that true?
So they did have like a debut and a pre-debut training period, and they also came in at different times. So they debuted in 2013. Some people joined in 2011. But so in Korea, there's like the big three that are known for producing all sorts of K-pop groups for decades, like dating back to the 80s. And so this BTS is not part of the big three. So they basically started with their company. Like I think there was like one major group before them and a couple of single artists that were part of the company, but nothing really like struck super big. And then they did do training, but it wasn't as structured as the other groups the other companies, I'm sorry, because they didn't have this infrastructure that had like gone on for decades. It was kind of like they were trusting each other to move forward together. And but how the group itself formed was basically there was like a training period, and there was a period pre-debut where they like came together and finalized their own sort of songs and dances and stuff. But I would say that it wasn't as like as competitive, because I don't think that there was as many people that they were considering for the group, as opposed to in other companies where you have 25 people and they're trying to find 5 of them for the group. Here, it's my understanding it was more like, oh, let's do auditions, and like the people that we say yes to are the people in the group, except for there was, I think at one point, one other person that was like around the group, and he kind of split off and didn't ever become part of the group.
So it's fascinating in this culture that we talk a lot about the power of South Korean media is the replication, and the model being replicated. Here is arguably its most successful export, not being part of the exact replication.
Everyone loves an underdog story, and
the evolution of the replication and how it can look different as time goes on. Oh my God, fascinating.
Yeah, I think that they definitely they struck at the right time, and there was enough people who saw how hard that they were trying and how much just domestically they weren't getting recognition, and they actually blew up independently, they blew up internationally before really becoming big domestically because of these the factors. Like, it was the international fans that made the domestically be like, oh, we have to like pay attention to this group. That's my understanding of it, that I've kind of picked up on.
That's still rad. And so we're gonna unfortunately have to hit pause here until we have Ashley back for other things. But if you guys want to check the show notes, I will bribe Ashley into giving me some of her favorite BTS songs to link directly, and some other ways to kind of get in. And in the Google Doc that you guys will find, there's a whole lot of other resources about how to get into K-pop, including NPR's review of their album that came out during the COVID times. And NPR has been engaging with BTS quite a bit comparatively to some other K-pop bands. So they've got a lot of coverage there. But Ashley, this has been a delight. Thank you for this small window of your time, and we will definitely reconnect soon.
Yes, I look forward to it.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.